So let's dive into Florida Georgia week coming up, of course, in Jacksonville. So I was watching a show yesterday, and the game was brought up on the SEC network, and both guys just dove right into Anthony Richardson. This game is on him. It's all about him. They said, is it that really simple, the deciding factor in this game? And they both dove straight in on Anthony Richardson. I don't see it. I understand he's the quarterback. Of course, it's important. And I understand the other factor that the ceiling is so high that he could just bust out and have an amazing game versus the floor is still pretty low based on those wild card kind of performances he gives you. So I get it, but man, a lot riding on this guy.
Mark, it is. And I can see it in ways because we've seen this Florida defense this year, and it is at historic bad levels right now for this Florida defense. So if you take how this season has played out so far, you're probably looking at the only way Florida can win is in shootout fashion. And if you're going to win in shootout fashion, more than likely that means Anthony Richardson's going to have to go out there and have the game of his life. We haven't seen that this year yet against a top-tier defense. We saw a great game versus Tennessee, and that was almost enough to upset the Vols in Neyland about a month ago. And we've seen the great performance versus Utah in the first game of the season as well. But given this Georgia defense and their reputation, he's going to go out there and have to play the game of his life. He puts up the same stats versus this Georgia defense as he gives against Tennessee. Well, that's even better because we know the level of this Georgia defense, but it may take that type of performance to get this upset, to get Florida's 22-point underdog. This is the largest spread ever in this game, at least dating back to 95, when people can kind of go back and start looking at it. Even those 90 teams with Spurrier and Georgia wasn't that good. I think the largest spread was 19 points. So this is an historic spread in this game. And the only way a lot of people see this upset happening is in shootout fashion led by Anthony Richardson. But Mark, at the same time, Florida leads the country in 6.4 yards to rush. But here's the thing. Georgia doesn't give up rushing yards. So something's going to have to give there. And I think a lot of people probably lean the way of, all right, well, Georgia's just going to hold Florida's run game in check. That is going to put the game on Anthony Richardson's shoulders. So it is probably an easy way out, Mark, but sometimes the easy way out is the right way to look at a game. And more than likely, if it plays out the way we have seen this season play out so far, Anthony Richardson is going to have to go out there and play the game of his life for the Gators to have an upset chance.
Yeah, I was going to say with Montrell Johnson at over 7 yards per carry, Trevor Etienne not far behind him. You throw in the quarterback runs, and Anthony Richardson, even with sack yardage, comes in at 7 yards per carry. So he's obviously picking up yards in chunks. The rushing attack, did you expect this kind of success?
Yeah, Mark, we did. I mean, as I mentioned, going back to offensive line, we talked about it earlier. They brought Osiris Torrance in, and they brought a lot of experience. And then Florida had a deep running back room. You go back to the spring, and we were looking at it even deeper. It was, all right, Montrell Johnson comes over from Louisiana. He'll be ingrained in this offense. He'll know what to do. Okay, you'll pencil him in as a contributor. And then Naquan Wright missed spring, but he had a lot of SEC experience. And then back in the spring, you had DeMarcus Bowman. He transfers away from UCF, deep running back room, okay. And then Lorenzo Lingard had thought to be the number 3 guy. He goes through spring, maybe even been the best running back in the spring at times. But then fall camp rolls around, and lo and behold, we get the first depth chart, and it's Trevor Etienne behind Montrell Johnson and Naquan Wright. So it's like, okay, well, maybe this freshman has shown something. And then from the very first game, from the get-go, we see, all right, Trevor Etienne, we see why he's third on the depth chart. Very first game versus Utah, a good defense. He's making big plays. So, yeah, Mark, we thought it was a deep running back room, a talented running back room. It has shown to be that way. There was some question if Montrell Johnson could translate his Sun Belt freshman of the year running back at that position. Would that translate to SEC play? And it certainly has. Would Trevor Etienne be some kind of impact? He certainly has. And then, of course, you throw in Anthony Richardson at the same time with his ability. We've seen all the big runs this year. So, yeah, it's maybe even a little better than I thought. When you look at some of the explosive runs Florida's been able to hit, they've really not been able to show enough explosiveness in that department in the last couple of years. So yeah, his deep running back room, experienced offensive line, got one of the best offensive linemen in the country there with Osiris Torrance. He was banged up, Mark. He didn't play the last game for the Gators versus LSU, but Billy Napier did say on his Monday press conference he is back at practice this week and he'll be full go for Georgia.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown, and please give us a like here at the Voice of College Football. Subscribe and get on over there to Gators Breakdown. So back to the defense, you brought up how horrific it is, and you go to any metric in terms of overall defense, yards per play, they all look bad. Yep. So Todd Grantham, of course, was a whipping boy for a long time. Patrick Toney, what is he saying about his defense in regards to their efforts to get this thing right?
Mark, we don't get to hear from assistant coaches there. For Billy Napier, it's all him. He controls the narrative. He controls the message. And you can kind of tell he's probably tired of talking about it by now. You know, Florida had the bye week, of course. So, of course, that kind of ramps up a lot of repeat questions on one side of the ball where they're struggling. He says, look, it's been the bye week. You know, we concentrated on us last week. We've got to identify the issues there. And he says, you know, that's what they've been able to do. And here's the thing, Mark, you know, Florida could possibly figure out some things on defense, but at the same time, you're playing a really good Georgia team. Hey, you might figure some things out on defense, but if Georgia goes out there and has a good game, it may not look like it anyway. You may have to wait till you play Texas A&M and South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Florida State coming up to see whatever maybe they have figured out this bye week to really tell. But if you see improvement, but you still got a game to play versus Georgia this week. You know, you hope you have figured some things out. Maybe it's a simplification, but part of it is Florida's just got to win up front. And that's been the issues, probably more than anything, why they have struggled in third and long. They've been giving up so many third downs the last couple of games versus Missouri, versus LSU. Not just third downs. It's been third and longs. I mean, teams are converting 3rd and 18, 3rd and 19, 3rd and 22 on this Gator defense. But it starts with getting just no pressure. The quarterbacks are sitting back there all day to throw. And then just a lot of miscommunication, a lot of confusion on the back end. So I think those things that you can at least control, the confusion, getting everybody on the same page. I mean, those are issues we've seen from this Gator defense the last couple of years. And this kind of supposed to maybe be a little easier in this defense, but they are learning at the same time. So I do think, you know, we'll have to kind of see what they have identified as the issues. You know, Billy Napier says it's not really one thing you can really point to. One play, it might be effort. One play, it might be confusion. The next play, it might be a bad call by the coach. It's never a consistent issue with what you see from this defense. So maybe some kind of youth movement going along as well. I mean, it's been a lot of veterans, and it's specifically on the back end, you know, with Trey Dean, and just kind of liability there at the safety position at times. And like I said, up front, Florida not winning enough of those battles up front. So, Mark, it's not really one thing you can point to figure out what are the issues on defense. But, hey, that's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why there was a bye week this past week. Maybe you can identify something to where, look, Mark, they're not going to magically turn around and be this great defense from here on out. But most Florida fans would take just a bad defense right now because they are terrible. It is, as you said, every metric you look at right now, it is ranked in the hundreds pretty much, and it is a historically bad defense right now. I know a lot of people are looking for reasons why. You know, it is a transition, and I think we talked about this on Gators Breakdown a lot. Is, you know, if you're a defensive coordinator and it's your first year, how much do you change? Do you want your players to learn inside your system and you just take the lumps along the way and let them learn your defense, or do you change it wholesale in the middle of the season? And okay, well, they're not really learning your defense now. They're just playing a version of itself. You know, so you had to maybe balance how much a win's worth. I mean, wins are always worth a lot, but in the long run, in the big picture, are you giving up learning opportunities by changing so much just to go get a victory? So checks and balances. You weigh different things there, Mark. So a lot of ways to look at it. A lot of questions here when you look at this Gator defense.
Time to talk up the Dogs here at the Voice of College Football with Georgia and its annual grudge match with Florida in Jacksonville. We got Savannah Lee Richardson on the line from Dawn of the Dog. Talking up Georgia football. Please hit the like button and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Check out Savannah's work at Dawn of the Dog. Hey, Savannah.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. For most of the national media and college football fans, Georgia's been off the radar for a little while. People still remember Oregon crushed them, got them out of the way, and that was a big win, of course, in a national matchup. I checked in on the Missouri game because I couldn't believe the score I was seeing. So I watched the fourth quarter. I was like, well, this isn't a game that I was planning on watching, but I'm going to watch the fourth quarter, and saw, of course, the Bulldogs pull that one out. So they had that kind of slump against Kent State and Missouri, and then now they've kind of righted the ship, albeit not against the best competition, Auburn, Vandy. But here we are against Florida. Some people might consider this a challenge, others not a challenge. It's a 22-point spread. They're supposed to take care of business pretty easily, but it is Florida with some pretty decent SEC talent on the roster.
Yeah, I don't ever like going into the Georgia-Florida game being overly confident because it's just one of those matchups that, regardless of the records between the two teams, regardless of the rankings, both teams are going to bring their best, and it's going to be a dogfight until the very end, or a gator fight, whoever side you're on. And so that 22-point spread is a little daunting to me, but I think of like the last 4 or 5 years of playing it outside the Florida beating Georgia, like I think they have won by around 17 or more points or so. So I get why Vegas has done that. But yeah, that little slump kind of caused some tension between the dog fans and, the national media. But I don't think Georgia was ever too in trouble. I think Missouri got them on a good night, not overlooking Missouri by any means, but that defensive front's pretty strong. I don't think people give Missouri enough credit because they're Missouri, but they're an SEC team for a reason. And so I think that they gave Georgia the best game that they had, and that's what's going to happen when you're ranked number 1, number 2, number 3 in the nation. So, yeah, it was a slump. Would love to see the offense not do that when you have so many playmakers, but as long as they continue to move forward and lay on the gas, I'm pretty confident in this team, especially this week against the Gators.
So, Savannah, before we get to the matchup, there are some injuries out there that, as a member of the media, we always know that we don't get the full deal. And so that's just kind of what the situation is. But trying to speculate, okay, based on what we've seen, based on what we know, based on what little the coaches are giving us, where do you stand on a number of the guys that are nicked up right now?
So Kirby mentioned that Jalen Carter and AD Mitchell are still rehabbing. He mentioned that yesterday that Jalen's a little ahead of AD, which is surprising considering AD's been out longer than Jalen Carter. But those two are 50-50 for me right now for this game. If Georgia doesn't need them, why not rest them up for the Tennessee game? But then there's also Dan Jackson, who is one of the rotating starting safeties for the Dogs. And I wouldn't even necessarily call him a starting safety because Malachi Starks has kind of taken over that position alongside Chris Smith. But Dan Jackson is someone who made big plays. He's the one that laid that last block on the pick 6 in the national championship game. Everybody loves Dan Jackson. He's just, a household name that we all appreciate. I believe he has a stress fracture in his foot, so he'll be having season-ending surgery. Those are the 3 big ones right now. Kendall Milton's still getting back healthy from his groin injury a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not sure how much we'll see him. Other than that, Georgia seems relatively healthy. I think Smile Mondin should be back this week after an injury. I'm trying to think of his ankle or something, but he should be good to go for Florida, which will give Georgia another headhunter in this linebacker position. But the injury bug hit again, and thankfully Georgia's got that depth to step up, and they've been able to, like up front with Zion Logue and Warren Brinson and that group, to see them step up in Jalen's absence has been so good to see, because you just don't know, and because it's Jalen Carter, and we all know what kind of a playmaker he is. But yeah, a little banged up, but the bye week helped out a good bit, it seems like, at least from the reading between the lines with Kirby. But hopefully this game we won't need them too much, and we can use other guys like Dalton Blaylock and them to make plays.
Jalen Carter was talked about almost as much during the NFL draft this past spring as the actual Bulldogs that were drafted, because of the prospectus that he would be a top 5 pick in next year's NFL draft in 2023. So I see that he's missed a couple games. and he's been nicked up, as you've just outlined. So has he been able to have the kind of season and show himself to the degree that we would think?
Not in my opinion. I think he hasn't been able to play up to his potential at all. I believe he hurt his ankle in the Oregon or that second game, and he was playing through it. He sat a little bit, but he was still able to kind of come in on third downs and do a little bit. But then he hurt I believe it's a knee injury now, his MCL. I don't want to be like, yep, that's it, whatever. But that's kind of what the rumors and the initial reports and stuff seem to hit on. And so, no, I don't think he is having the season that we all expected him to. I think we wanted him to be a force of nature and be that big plug up front, but he just hasn't because of the injury stuff. So hopefully, maybe this means he may come back for his senior year since he hasn't done much. But that's wishful thinking. As someone with high draft stock as he does, I think his previous resume kind of speaks for himself. But I'd love to see him come back since he hasn't been able to perform as much, especially if he's not able to go this week or even next week. Like, I just don't know what this injury looks like. And they say he's getting back to being healthy, but that MCL knee kind of situation, you just really never know. And it can be really tricky. You don't want to cause more injuries. So we'll see. I hope he gets back and plays well. But to me, it looks like it's going to be more better for the future in terms of maybe him coming back and playing again next year.
We know what the Dogs, yeah?
Not that he'll miss a ton more games. I don't necessarily know. I'm just saying, like, if he doesn't get like 10 plus games, I don't know. I'm just saying, hopefully he can come back for a senior year if he's not happy with how this year went. I'm not saying by any means that he's going to miss the rest of the season, because I do think he'll be back. I just don't necessarily know when.
We know what the Dogs lost in the NFL draft on defense, but we know what they're producing again. They're in the top 2 or 3 or 4 in all the metrics on defense this year. And now this weekend, they take on a quarterback who's extremely talented, but error prone, up and down, roller coaster. He could be great for a series. He can be awful for a series. It seems like the kind of quarterback that this defense has taken advantage of for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Bless his heart, because it's got to be tough for your confidence in general, having those kind of back and forth moments. I hope Richardson is able to kind of like gather it together, because it's more fun in the East when teams are good and you produce games like next week's this coming between Tennessee and Georgia. Like, that's something that I think the SEC East has been wanting for years and years and years, and now we're finally getting it. But Anthony Richardson is a hell of a player. He's got a lot of talent. He just hasn't quite gotten that confidence in himself. So Georgia's defense should be able to kind of rattle them a little bit. I just did a story on the defense. So they're number 2 in the nation in scoring defense, number 4 in rushing, number 4 in passing, and number 4 overall. So Georgia's got one of the best defenses in the country, and Florida hasn't faced anything close to that. And Georgia's hungry. Jamon Dumas-Johnson said in an interview yesterday that they still remember 2020 and that chip's still on their shoulder. And so this week could get ugly in terms of putting pressure on Anthony and just kind of laying down the hammer. I'd love to see Georgia just absolutely demoralize Florida. We don't get to see that often because of how crazy this rivalry is, but it would be nice though.
Yeah, last year was a scoreless game until late in the first half. So Florida hung in. And then when the dam broke, it was gone. And they're scoring all over the place and turnovers and big plays. And absolutely. So when we look at the offensive side, Savannah, I came into this season, I think most people did, looking at Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh as the 2 main ball carriers. When you look at the distribution at running back, how does that size up? It's pretty dead even between Edwards, McIntosh, and Milton.
Yeah, I would even throw Robinson in there as well. What he did against Auburn, and then a little bit of what he did against Vanderbilt really impresses me. I love his vision. I love the way he runs. He's little Nick Chubb, and he's your star for the future of this team. Kenny McIntosh is an overall just versatile player. He has shown time and time again he's good in the backfield. He's good catching balls in the backfield. He's good running the ball. Whatever you need him to do, he's going to do. I'd love to see him get a little bit more confident and hold his head up a little bit more when it comes to running the ball. But then again, you need the offensive line to help out in that sense. Kendall Milton, I really want him to just explode in the second half of the season. I feel so bad because he got hurt again. But when he does get that confidence up, he's extremely good. He was really good between the tackles. When he doesn't, he tends to juke and jive a lot. He tends to jump around. If he would just keep running forward, I think that would help him out tremendously. I think Dejon Edwards is a surprise to most people, but Georgia fans kind of saw that last year in some of the cleanup games that he got to go into. And so to see him getting those significant amount of reps and proving himself, even though nobody really expected him to, is awesome, because of all of the running backs, he has the best vision. And it's just impressive because no one really expected him to. And so that, to me right now, Georgia across the board has very evenly talented running backs. However, I would put Branson Robinson a step above them in terms of talent. The only difference is his inexperience. The other three have so much more experience than he does, and that's kind of why you see him not getting as many reps, which is understandable. That's what Georgia has done since Kirby's gotten there. But to me, next year we could see a Nick Chubb kind of Sony Michel-esque type of a running back situation with him and Andrew Paul. Unless Dejon Edwards comes back, then it'll be Dejon and Branson. But I like this little running back group. It's good to see Georgia finally being able to run the ball successfully some. I just hope that offensive line continues to get that push that they need to do so, because when Georgia can run the ball, it allows Stetson to spread it out as well. You got to throw Stetson in there as well. His, 45-plus yard run a couple weeks ago was incredible. Just see his 4.5, speed and everything else. But this is a much more this offense, I think, tricks people in a lot of ways, because Stetson is putting up a ton of passing yards and everything, but he only has 7 passing touchdowns. That's because Georgia scored, I think, 23 or 24 on the ground. So they're utilizing those backs. I'm mostly defense, but I think this offense is more exciting to me this year because there's so many different moving parts.
Yeah, Stetson had a big day, obviously, against Oregon. A lot of people paid attention to that game. And now you've got quarterbacks like Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and others that are throwing up 20, 25 touchdowns, and haven't heard much about Stetson Bennett. Now he's going to play some games in the next few weeks, first against Florida now, and then against Tennessee, that people are going to pay attention to, national TV. They're going to be the game of the week in the SEC. So he may get a little bit more love here in the next month or so. What's that?
Don't hold your breath. He's not ever going to get that respect or anything else, because that's Stetson, and he's a former walk-on, and nobody cares that he won the national championship or has 22,000 passing yards already. Like, it's the fact that he hasn't thrown 23 touchdowns, 18 touchdowns like Hendon Hooker. I'm like, the dude's completing 70% of his passes. He's doing what he's supposed to be doing. Like, what more do you want out of him? Well, he's not doing this, this, and this. And I'm like, oh my God, what else do you need from him? Honestly, like, he is a leader. He runs his offense efficiently, and it's scoring 40 points a game. Like,
absolutely. You don't have to sell me. We'll sell all the people out there watching the video, because I've come to his defense for a long, long time. And that was even before he won a national championship. All right, let's finish off by sizing up this Florida matchup from the standpoint of off the field, big Eastern Division rivalry. We know the history. We know it's a big deal. It's one of the few matchups in college football played at a neutral site. That comes up every year in regards to what Kirby Smart would like to see happen versus maybe what the fan base is, and just a lot of, obviously, folks in that area that are big movers and shakers that either love the Gators or love the Bulldogs, wanted to stay in Jacksonville. So what's the latest take from Kirby and the way this thing may go?
Oh, so Kirby's still standing by the fact that he'd rather have it home and home for a recruiting standpoint, which totally understandable. You know, teams like Alabama and Auburn get to do that for the Iron Bowl, and to me, it's a simple fix, figuring out a way how to have recruits at neutral site games. But again, like, that's a whole lot of moving parts too. But that's still his biggest MO when it comes to wanting to move the games. He loves the game in Jacksonville. I think he mentioned something about it this year about how the tradition and everything else is great. He enjoyed playing in Florida and Jacksonville when he was playing. It's just the fact that he knows how many more big time names he can get recruiting home and home. And so I think that's just his biggest thing. The contract is up next year in Jacksonville, 2023, with the option to extend into 2025. But with Oklahoma and Texas coming into the SEC, I don't think a lot of people know exactly what they're going to do. Some think it's going to go to 2025. I personally think he's going to go through next year. And if he can convince but Georgia and Florida can come together and figure out the scheduling in terms of home and home, we could see next year be the last year in Jacksonville, which is heartbreaking for me being down in South Georgia. It's a 45-minute drive and it's nice, but at the same time, like, if he genuinely thinks like it's going to help, cool, let's do it and let's see. It's not like we can't go back to Jacksonville if it doesn't work out or if they figure out a way to get recruits and stuff down there. But hate to see the lose of the tradition, but we're seeing this year a lot of fans kind of turning that tide to wanting to do the home and home. And I don't know if those are the fans that are even going to the Georgia-Florida game. I think some people suggest that this game is just outdated now being on a neutral field. I love it because it's unique, but it's such a dividing thing among the fans, which is really silly to me because it's out of our control. But I'd love for them to figure out maybe a rotation. I don't know. I just figure it out and then tell us, and then we'll just go from there because I'm tired of arguing about it every single year, almost throughout the entire year at this point, because we do it in the spring when they meet. We do it in the summer because someone brings it up. And now we're doing it again in the fall because they finally, are discussing the kind of the terms and everything. I will say, like, they made a joint statement this week about really taking the time to think about the decision in terms of extending the contract through 2025. So it's going to be really interesting to see when they announce that, if they'll wait till next year or wait till the offseason or what. But keep it in Jacks or not, I'm kind of indifferent at this point. I've been enough times to appreciate it and talk about it, but why not bring it home and home, as good as the stadium atmosphere is? And sorry to be on a rant, but like the 3:30 p.m. kickoff thing, like once CBS leaves the SEC, like how is that going to work? I would love to see this a night game in Athens. Heck yeah. Kind of leaning that towards, because this will be their fourth or fifth 3:30 game this year, which is great. That's a primetime slot, but give me a night game. We haven't had a night game except in Missouri, and that'll count to me.
Georgia, Florida should be fun. We'll see if it's competitive. And then Tennessee's up next. Savannah Lee Richardson, Dawn of the Dog. Get on over there. Check out her work. Savannah, appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game.
Thanks, Mark.